All right, well, let's talk about profit margins part two. Excited to dive in here. So, look, profit is the lifeblood of your business. And although touting sales numbers may feel exciting, most of the time, the number that matters the most is your profit. So, as an example, if you do $1 million a year in sales, but your profit is only 5%, you're only taking home $50,000. So, it's cool to say, yeah, I have a business doing $1 million a year, but the business really isn't doing much for you. So profit is important first, really from a risk standpoint. So if you're going to risk a higher investment into a business, you want to be rewarded for taking on that risk. So some businesses are known to have lower or higher average profit margins, right? Food is one of those businesses. Most people think about food first when thinking about franchises, brands like McDonald's or Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. But the reality is that food is one of the lowest profit margin businesses out there. Most credible sources show that the average food, or QSR, which stands for quick service restaurant, has an industry average margin of 0 to 15%, with the bulk being around the 5 to 10% range. Yuck. Especially when you think about the high investment that many of them have. So given that I was in the food business, I usually tell people to stay away from food. Really, unless you plan to own more than 3 locations, and we'll talk about that deeper in the scaling modules of really, what that looks like. So if you look at a retail franchise doing $750,000 in sales, and it did a 15% profit margin, that's $112,000 in profit. Then you have your debt service, aka your loan, right? So let's say your loan is for $350,000, 9% interest. Right now, SBA loans are somewhere around 10 or 11%, so that's conservative. And that's about a $4,500 a month loan payment, which it comes out to $54,000 a year. So if you subtract $112,000 profit with your debt payment, right? Your take home would be $58,000. So you probably want to leave a cushion in your business account for cash flow. So after all is said and done, maybe you take home $40,000. This is why understanding retail versus service is huge. This is not to say that there aren't some retail models that can't pull high average sales numbers per location, but you need to know that. And if a concept is only going to pull $400,000 to $500,000 on average, and they're using Class A retail space, maybe it makes sense to look at other options, right? And some of these food spots, you'll look at their FDD. They say $500,000 and $600,000 in average unit sales for a $400,000 build out. the math does not math. So, okay, let's take a look. So this is for Papa John's. And so in their FDD, right, they show, corporate locations versus franchise locations. So you can see that their corporate stores do about 15% higher in sales, 1.3 to 1.1. And that's probably because of the amount of money they spend. They just probably outspend in advertising. And actually, we'll see that here in a minute. The median, 1.3, 1.1. And it shows the range of sales, right? So range of sales there, with the combined AUV being average. AUV means average unit volume, 1.169. Then we start to take a look and we see, for the average traditional corporate store, you're talking about 11% EBITDA. Remember, we talked about this number. So they're doing 11% EBITDA. Their cost of food is 30%. Labor costs 24%. Manager's labor, they're spending 8% on advertising, which is pretty aggressive. That's a lot to spend 8% on that. I forget what the note for controllables was about. And then they show having to pay the 5% royalty fee. And so then they break down that the average restaurant without the royalty, 10.7%, right? But the restaurant with the 5% royalty is about 6% profit margin. So remember what I was saying before. So you're talking about, okay, the store's doing 1.1 on average, but you're taking home $50,000 in profit per store based on the way that those numbers break down, right? And those are the corporate locations. This one is Crumble Cookie. So this was one of the examples I gave, one of those stores that was between $367,000 and $1.4 million. Now, Crumble Cookie is sold out all over the country. You cannot buy this franchise. But if we look at their average, so they break it down in their FDD. So the average revenue is $1.83 million. Average gross profit, remember we talked about how gross profit is a deceptive number because it doesn't tell the full picture, $775, but the average net profit margin is $298,000. So now that may sound like a lot. You look at, well, it's making $300,000, but it's still only a 16% profit margin. And then if you look at the median, you're still at 14% profit margin. So even like high performing stores that do, high sales, you're still really, again, in that 0 to 15% range. And you're talking about they charge a ton for their cookies. I think their average cookie is $5. So if you were to do food, it would really have to be something with really high average unit sales, like 1.8 million. So let's keep going. This is a franchise in the wellness industry. So in their FDD, they show an average gross revenue of $962,000 in sales, average gross revenue, right? Average median revenue, $924. And then you can see the lowest to the highest. But let's stick with the median number here, $924. And they cost between $779 to $1.3 to get open. So if we look at this, remember when we talked about the 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio? So this doesn't match at all because, that's like a 1.2, 1.3. Because you're having to, at lowest, it's 1.2, 1.3, putting up $780,000 to do $900,000 in sales. Those are not great numbers. And I don't know why we actually had this example in here because it doesn't show profit margin. So this one is in the kids entertainment space. This was the trampoline park. And so if we look at some of these numbers, right, they list them in quartiles in terms of average sales. So you can see average annual sales, 2.1 million, median gross sales, 1.9 million, right? With the highest doing 4.4, which is pretty cool. That's a lot. So, and then we can see what's cool is they list their profit margin. So EBITDA of their median is 20%. And so again, a lot of businesses like to get over 20% EBITDA is going to be very, especially for anything that has a retail location, it would be very difficult to get over 20% EBITDA, unless for whatever reason it's a low cost to operate and it has a potential for high sales, but there's not many that do over 20%. And so we see here that their total initial investment 1.6 to 2.8. So, again, from a sales to investment rate, you're talking about this is just a 1-to-1 here. And so you may say, okay, look, well, we're making at, let's just call it $2 million in median gross sales at a 20% profit margin, that's $400,000 a year. But then when you think about, well, what's the cost of debt on a $2 million loan, right? So actually, let me just do that real quick. Right now, we have, let's see, on a $2 million, let's just call it $2 million loan, you'd have to put 20% down. Let's call it 1.75 as the actual loan amount at a 9% interest rate. Is your loan payments are $266,000 a year. And it could be higher depending upon if it's a higher range. So it makes $400K in profit, $266K in debt payment. So you're netting your take home $135. You probably want to leave a good, at that high cost of a business, half of that in. So again, you start to really take a look and see, where do the numbers make sense in terms of the risk that you're willing to take for the reward. And again, these are just examples. There's over 4,000 franchises, but I wanted to give you a wide range of examples where maybe it does make sense, maybe it doesn't, and maybe where at first glance you're looking at the numbers thinking, oh wow, they do $2 million in sales, 20% profit margin, but you really have to start looking under the hood as you're going in. Again, those are the things that we do when we work with clients. So you don't have to worry about that, at this point in time, but it's for your education to figure out, hey, is this really something that I want to do? Is there money in this whole franchise thing? So let's look at some service-based franchises, and some of these may require a warehouse, small office. They typically won't be Class A real estate, which has the highest cost per square foot. And then service concepts typically target between 20 to 30% profitability. Please keep in mind, though, what you target, like businesses lose money and can lose money. So just because that's the target, someone can still run the business poorly and lose money even when other people are making money. So if we take a look, this is a home services franchise. So we take a look, they have median sales of $883 and profit of $175. Right? So you're right at about 20% adjusted profit, and that's at disclosed expenses, and that's adjusted profit. So those numbers could actually be a little bit lower. I don't know what they mean by disclosed expenses there. It could mean that sometimes business owners write off personal things or write off things that like aren't required for the business and still write them off on their profit and loss statement. But you're talking about, hey, the build out here is only between 143 to 205 to do median sales of 883. You're talking about a 4-to-1 sales to investment ratio here, right? This is another home services concept. So if we take a look here, we see across 2020 to 2022, and then we see what the gross sales were by year. And this could have been the COVID bump. This could have just been, hey, franchisees are in business longer. And they give you a really, really good breakdown here of, this is one of the most transparent item 19s that you would see, but you can see what the gross profit average looks like there, as well as the adjusted profit margin. So this is a unicorn of a business where they're showing 40%, 33%, 29% profit margins. Definitely not your everyday business that's going to produce that. And then this is another home services franchise that has a bunch of affiliate locations that are like partially owned by the franchisor. Total investment here is 110 to 200K, and you're talking about the average gross revenue. The median gross revenue is 3.2 million. So you're talking about a more than 10x on the sales to investment ratio, which is pretty wild. And so this is the average of the numbers here across all of them. And so what they're showing is average gross revenue, less total disclosed expenses. So again, they're only showing Estimated average gross revenue. Let's see. Do gross profit. So 25% margin here. I don't know why they call it average gross revenue though. Estimated average gross revenue less disclosed expenses. Okay, so they are showing the profit margin here, but again on disclosed expenses. But you get the gist of the overall opportunity with this concept without having specific clarity on all the details. Right? You can see that they're paying the estimated sales manager. Base salary plus bonus is almost $90K. So that's it for the second round of profit margins. I hope you found that insightful. And if you're wanting help finding a franchise with strong margins, and you want to work with our team or want to have a conversation about that, we're happy to help. And that link will be at the bottom if you'd like to schedule a call. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. We're going to continue to talk about scaling. How do you then start scaling into multi-unit and really building a franchise empire?